Welcome to another mini lecture brought to you by thought leaders in their field. We are happy to share some of our ideas in brief and encourage you to get in touch with us for further information on the topic.
Welcome to the mini lecture series of the Bachelor Program Project Management and IT. Theoretical aspects of stakeholder management. My name is Roland Schuster and I guide you through this lecture. This mini lecture provides a definition of the term stakeholder, an introduction to stakeholder management in the context of project management, an explanation of the connection of power, politics and stakeholder management, an introduction to the stakeholder grid. Stakeholder is any individual or group who can affect or is affected by the achievement of the organization's objectives. This is the definition of Freeman given 1984 in the context of firms. Here you can see a sketch of a stakeholder view of a firm. Translated into project management, Stakeholder, in German Anspruchsgruppen, are individuals, groups or organizations who have relevant relationships to the project. These relationships can be concernment, certain interests, legitimation or experience. If we have a look at a visualization, a certain project has a project principal as one of the stakeholders, the project manager as another one, project staff, customers, public authorities, suppliers, competitors. What might be also of high interest is the expected response of the different stakeholders. Kuster et al. Suggest 4 steps of stakeholder management. Identify stakeholders. So first of all, the theoretical frame just gives you a rough idea who could be stakeholders, but in practice you have to identify those. After you identified the stakeholders, you want to analyze them. So you can use the symbols we have seen in the last slide, pointing out who of the stakeholders are positive, who of the stakeholders are sort of neutral, and who of them are negative in relation to the project. After analyzing the stakeholders, you need to evaluate those, and after evaluation, you want to steer the stakeholders. Possible approaches for dealing with stakeholders are to involve stakeholders in the project. For example, due to a suitable project committee, or by defining tasks and roles for stakeholders. Another thing would be clarify interests and objectives. This is very important because conflicts of interest will be there all of the time. So you need to find out as early as possible those conflicts of interest and address them with conflict management or mediation. The same with objectives. Another point would be to inform stakeholders. And here it is very important that you adjust the types of communications to the channels that are in accordance to the stakeholders. And is not only an information at one point of the project, at one point in time of the project, it's a maintained dialogue. You need to build up a dialogue that is kept from the very beginning to the end of the project, so that you are always informed about the mood the stakeholders are in at a certain time of the project life cycle. Another point is that you create additional communication vessels. Those can be workshops, large group interventions, or even information events. Politics in general. The political sphere begins with indirect communication. What does this mean? Well, it means for the project team, the project manager and the staff, that group dynamics will be in the foreground. Because direct communication is possible and members know each other intimately. On the other hand, for stakeholder management, it means that this is by and large done by indirect communication, which brings politics into the play. That does mean power games, indirect communication that you need to figure out what's going on. So to manage stakeholders is to observe, to negotiate, to win allies and be aware of opponents. In other words, it is a political endeavor. We now have talked about the theoretical frame and about the definition of stakeholder in a rather abstract way. The next few slides we have a look at the so-called stakeholder grid. This is a tool that can be used to identify stakeholders in terms to their power and predisposition to support or oppose the change project. So this tool will help you in practice to get an overview about the stakeholders and to develop tactics to handle those stakeholders, to steer those stakeholders. The grid itself is in the horizontal span a differentiation between low and high power. In the vertical span, it's a differentiation between negative attitude on the bottom and positive attitude on the top end. If we have a look at a certain stakeholder, we can differentiate several possibilities that might happen within a project. So for example, a stakeholder, like you see in this slide, could have a negative attitude and could be rather in the high power area of the grid. One possible move would be to win the support of those. You want to win the support of the high power people. Another possibility would be that you figure out that there is a low power stakeholder which has a very positive attitude towards the change project. So what you want to do with that stakeholder is to increase the influence so that this influence can also help you with your goals and your objectives within the change project. Another possibility to deal with high power stakeholders who are in the negative attitude side of this grid is to reduce the influence of those blockers, because they will be blockers within the context of the project. They don't like the project, they have a negative attitude to it, they have a negative attitude to the change. If they have high power, you wanna somehow change their position. In the first slide we have seen you might be able to change their attitude. And if you are not able to change the attitude, well, you might be able to change their influence. Another possible situation could be that you have certain supporters in different positions of the grid. And what you want to do is to build a coalition that is supportive for the project. You want to somehow bring people together into a coalition where you know that this coalition will be in the high power side, on the positive attitude side of the grid. Another thing would be if you figure out by observation, if you figure out by dialogue or by talking to several other stakeholders that there is a coalition that has high power and negative attitude towards the change project, you want to fragment this coalition, and you want to fragment it in a way that it is positive for your objectives. As you can see in this slide, you might win over some people out of the coalition to be of high power and in the positive range of the attitude. You might shift people to a low power position, especially those who have negative attitudes. And still, even if people have low power and positive attitude, it's still better than people with low power and negative attitude. So this would be another way how you put stakeholder management into practice. And as last example I give you here is to put new players into the game. So you are seeking for new sponsors, here they are called champions, and want to bring them into the play because they are of high power and have a positive attitude towards the change project. So this would be another way to influence the stakeholders. When you use the grid, it might be a very powerful tool to have a successful stakeholder management. In summary, stakeholder are people with concernment, certain interests, legitimation, or experience regarding a change project. It's vital for a change project to identify, analyze, evaluate, and steer stakeholders. Stakeholder management is a complex task that has to be taken care of during the whole change project lifetime. It's always on the agenda. It's not a one-time solution you can have here. You need to manage your stakeholders from the very beginning until the very end of the project. And to manage stakeholders is a political endeavor. The possibility you have within the course Stakeholder Management and Change Projects is that you will be able to put the theory into practice. You will be able to analyze your own cases, the cases you brought in, by using, for example, a stakeholder grid, by think about the different relationships, by think about the different stakeholder, by think about different communications. And in doing so, it's a possibility to put this theory about stakeholder management into practice.
This mini lecture has been brought to you by the UASBFI Vienna, one of the leading universities of applied sciences of business, management, and finance. Please check out other episodes of our mini lectures and scan the QR code for further reading on the topic we have covered in this episode, or for a quick link to the presenter's profile.